This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to answer the question, did Satoshi understand store of value? But first I want to answer a separate argument. Here's a typical argument, quote, Bitcoin has failed as a medium of exchange and now is just a store of value. And this is usually followed by, quote, so buy my shitcoin, buy my altcoin instead. Now this is completely false. Bitcoin has not failed as a medium of exchange. In fact, people hodl Bitcoin because they expect themselves or their children to be able to spend it someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 10 generations from now, but still someday. You would never choose to hodl something that you believed couldn't be sent or spent in the future as a medium of exchange to purchase goods and services. You would also never choose to hodl something whose value and purchasing power you thought would evaporate over time. This is where store of value comes in. So really, store of value and medium of exchange are conjoined twins that cannot be separated. And if Bitcoin doesn't maintain its purchasing power over time, and if Bitcoin cannot be easily moved around the world today and in the future, then it has no raison d'etre and no value. I keep coming back to this tweet from Bitstein from a few years ago. Praxeologically, in other words, practically, when it comes to human action and how people behave, praxeologically, quote-unquote, medium of exchange is defined by the intention of acquiring a good for future exchange rather than when it is spent. As such, Bitcoin can already be understood as a widely demanded medium of exchange, and this demand can be expected to continue to grow for numerous reasons. Now today we're going to examine a slightly different argument, and this is the argument that Satoshi created Bitcoin solely as a medium of exchange and had no understanding of money's function as a store of value. This was a question from CI 23346. From what I understand, Satoshi created Bitcoin primarily to be a medium of exchange without initially citing its store of value properties, which is probably its biggest selling point right now. My question is, how did Satoshi miss this? I'm thinking that maybe Satoshi didn't actually miss this. It's just that for something to become a medium of exchange, it must first qualify as a store of value. I think it's a good question. Did Satoshi not understand the category of store of value and thus fail to apply it to Bitcoin's construction? I think the answer is clearly no. I think Satoshi clearly understands that fiat money is a poor store of value, and thus he created Bitcoin to be an antidote. This is quite clear from Satoshi's post on February 11th, 2009. This famous quote, the root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency. So here Satoshi is showing and demonstrating that he clearly understands what currency debasement is and what causes it, the central bank printing too much of it. Satoshi also clearly understood that it was gold scarcity that helped to make it a good store of value over time. We know that from a couple of different places. We have his famous thought experiment post from August 27th, 2010. As a thought experiment, this is Satoshi writing, as a thought experiment, imagine there is a base metal as scarce as gold. A lot of people miss this phrase here, but as part of the thought experiment, you are assuming scarcity because you can't have store of value without scarcity. And then he goes on, in addition to this metal being as scarce as gold, it has the following properties. Boring gray in color, not a good conductor of electricity, not particularly strong, but not ductile or easily malleable either, not useful for any practical or ornamental purpose, so he's trying to eliminate that from gold. And one special magical property, can be transported over a communications channel. So here we see the medium of exchange piece of money as well as the store of value. And Satoshi clearly understands that if you're going to make something that's going to be a good store of value, it should be scarce in a similar way that gold is scarce. He also talks about this, Satoshi does, in one of his emails with Marty Malmy. This, I'll put a link in the description notes below. Historically, this is Satoshi writing, historically people have taken up scarce commodities as money. If necessary, taking up whatever is at hand, such as shells or stones. Each has a kernel of usefulness that help bootstrap the process, but the monetary value ends up being much more than the functional value alone. This is what we've been talking about over the past few days, how good monies are mostly all a monetary premium and very little of their value comes from their industrial use. So for example, silver is something like 90% industrial, 10% monetary premium. Gold flips that. Gold is 10% industrial demand, 90% monetary premium demand, and Bitcoin is 100% monetary premium. But here, Satoshi is talking about scarce commodities. So he understands that scarcity piece. He also shows here that he understands what a monetary premium is. And then he concludes with the most exciting sentence: until now, no scarce commodity, there's that word again, scarce commodity, which is important for store value. Until now, no scarce commodity can be traded over a communications channel, there's that medium of exchange piece, without a trusted third party has been available. So this is another example of Satoshi's clear understanding of commodities and their scarcity and what makes gold special. So really the biggest clue that Satoshi understood what store of value was and did not miss out on this, the biggest clue is hidden in plain sight. And this is the obvious fact. Satoshi imposed a maximum supply cap on Bitcoin of 21 million coins. This is scarcity that's imposed by the code and by the community running the code. There's another interesting quote from the Marty Malmi emails where Marty asks Satoshi, how did you decide on the inflation schedule for version 1 of Bitcoin? Where did 21 million coins come from? And Satoshi responds, my choice for the number of coins and distribution schedule was an educated guess. It was a difficult choice because once the network is going, it's locked in and we're stuck with it. I wanted to pick something that would make prices similar to existing currencies, but without knowing the future, that's very hard. I ended up picking something in the middle. If Bitcoin remains a small niche, it will be worth less per unit than existing currencies. So for example, it'd be worth less than $1. If you imagine it's being used for some fraction of world commerce, and there's that medium of exchange piece. Again, we have the scarcity and the store of value, but here he's talking about world commerce, which is clearly medium of exchange. If you imagine Bitcoin being used for some fraction of world commerce, then there's only going to be 21 million coins for the whole world, so it'd be worth much more per unit. So in conclusion, we can conclude that Satoshi understood quite well what makes something a good store of value, and that's its scarcity, the hardness of the money where it's very difficult or impossible to produce anymore. Unlike fiat, which has an infinite supply, is very unsound and very soft money. So Satoshi understood the category of store of value when it comes to money quite well. And also the second conclusion, which is really where we started this video, remember that it's impossible to separate the store of value function of a money from its medium of exchange function. They're inextricably tied up with one another. And the only real people who seem to want to separate these two things are the people who want to sell you something in the form of altcoins, in the form of shitcoins. So they'll always tell you, use Monero, use XRP, use Cardano, use Ethereum, use one of these garbage coins, because Bitcoin has failed as a medium of exchange. And when they tell you this, you know how little they understand money and how these two things are really, these two categories of medium of exchange and store of value are conjoined at the hip. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.